South Africa is in the middle of a massive foot and mouth disease outbreak, and most of the world has no idea how serious it is. Yesterday, the government rolled out a national vaccine and control plan, but inside the farming sector, there are real concerns about whether the science, the law, and the logistics are actually ready. So today, we're talking to Emma Niland and Grant Tracy. These are people who work directly with farmers on the ground, and they're here to explain what's really happening, what's being missed, and why this matters, not just to South Africa, but to global food supply, wildlife, and trade. So with that said, Emma, Grant, welcome to Saltlick Worldwide Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us, Sean.
Yeah. We've been talking back and forth, and off camera we spoke a little bit about this too. You know, it's so hard for us here in the States to get information, and if it wasn't for friends of mine specifically, reaching out to me and let me know what's going on, I would have had no idea it was even out there.
Yeah, unfortunately, not enough people are talking about it, and we're trying to change that. We're trying to educate the suppliers, the consumers, and hopefully push the government into doing their jobs.
Before we get started, and Emma, I'll start with you. Can you just give us a quick rundown, just introduce yourself for our audience?
Absolutely. So my name is Emma Niland. I have always lived in South Africa. I work for a consulting firm called Intelact, and we analyze farmers' businesses, look at their profitability as well as their physical performance, benchmark them against each other, and help them become more profitable.
That's perfect. It's like you had that script out and ready to go. You've done this before.
A couple times.
Grant, what about you? Can you give us a quick blurb?
Yeah, the difference is I haven't done this before, but my name's Grant Tracy. I own a game capture company based out of KwaZulu-Natal, the province of South Africa, and we deal a lot with farmers. It's our daily business here in South Africa. Game ranching is a big business, and they are our clients. So I hope I will be able to add to your conversation today.
I think you'll have some interesting insight too to bring to the table, something we don't always get. Well, let's kick it off then with, so I've got a bunch of notes that I made up over the past, call it a week now, that I've been really diving into this. But, for those, there's going to be viewers out there that have no idea what FMD is, what foot and mouth disease is. Emma, can you quickly just run down and, kind of an overview? You don't have to get super detailed, but just tell everybody what it is exactly.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I think the most important first thing to note is that foot and mouth disease is not the same as hand, foot, and mouth disease. It is not contagious to people, and you cannot be infected by it by eating meat or milk or anything like that. Foot and mouth purely affects, on a viral basis, cloven hoof animals. It gives them sores in their mouths, sores on their feet, sores on their teats, and sometimes it looks like a blowtorch has been taken to their udders, especially in dairies. It affects game, beef, pigs, sheep, all very, very differently. And certain strains affect different animals differently as well.
Just kind of run down for us. So what, obviously, we're talking cattle, that's the primary animal that's affected, but it's just not cattle either. That's what people need to understand. This has the potential to cross over, and I think it already has in some places. It can go to wildlife as well.
Yeah, I think Grant is the perfect person to speak into that. He's been my teenhood hero, and he works in this industry a lot. So I think Grant can answer that question for you.
Sean, foot and mouth disease affects all cloven-hoofed animals, as mentioned. So horses, zebras, those type of animals don't get foot and mouth, but all other animals do. Some are more prone than others, but there's also very important to realize that there are a number of different strains of foot and mouth. Foot and mouth is endemic to Africa. We've always had foot and mouth, so it's nothing new. But there are strains in the world that are not endemic to Africa and can cause chaos. So right now, in South Africa, we're dealing with SAT 1, 2, and 3, all African strains of foot and mouth, and it does affect, as I said, all cloven-hoofed animals, including wildlife. So in wildlife, they are perhaps because they are native to Africa, they do not suffer as badly as animals that are not native to Africa. The cattle that have come into the country, the sheep and things like that have been bought in over the years. Within wildlife, there's also some animals that are more prone, and the different ways of looking at it. For example, I'm not a specialist in this field. This is just what I've learned as a layman. And over the last couple of years, we've been involved in a foot-and-mouth outbreak now. For our first outbreak was 2019. It got cleaned up, and then 2021 again, and we've been under these restrictions since 2021. And basically, it boils down to that most animals shed the disease. They're contagious and again under correction, but I think it's 14 days. And then once they get over the 14 days, they're no longer contagious, and they shed the contagious. They call it shedding the disease. Whereas within the wildlife world, buffalo don't shed the disease. So buffalo are carriers, and if they become infected, they will remain infected for the rest of their lives within their herd. So different animals are contagious at different times. So that's the big difference between the biggest difference in between wildlife and the normal farming world of cattle and sheep. It's a buffalo that is a carrier.
And how does it spread?
Sean, the old research all shows that it's nose-to-nose contact, and then any virus that gets onto your shoes, onto your vehicle tires, any transmission can remain a risk. The latest research is showing that it may be airborne, but that has not been confirmed. We are seeing it in mist belts, but again, it may be jackal that are moving it under fences. It might be bush pig. It might be antelope moving. They're roaming game throughout South Africa, and that's something that one can't control on a normal commercial or non-commercial farm. In the communities, we do a lot of work with emerging farmers, and they are unable to fence in their animals. So unfortunately, those animals roam all over the show. They often get crawled together at night, but during the day, they are free to roam. So biosecurity is a big thing, and our minister addressed us yesterday on that. But unfortunately, you can't buy a security way out of this once it's within 10 Ks of you. There are just too many different elements to South Africa that stop that. Things like the different cultural events that are really important to our culture is one of the things that is not going to be stopped. Antelope, as I mentioned, the jackal, those sort of things, you can't stop them through biosecurity.
Explain this to people that there's a lot of our viewership has never been to South Africa, and what they don't understand in all of my travels, it's unique in that, especially these smaller villages and the rural communities, it's almost like these cattle that are owned by the villages, they just free range their cattle. They're walking down the roads, and there's no fences, and that, to me, looking in from the outside, that seems like it would be a giant problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our country's wealth is in livestock. It's seen as a massive wealth holder, sort of like a bank account, I suppose. And there are no fences. That communal land is for everyone to use. And you're dead right. There are animals roaming all over the show. Yeah, and it's uncontrollable.
Let's talk about the lethality of it. Let's say a dairy cow, for example, if it contracts a disease, what is the lethality? Can it get over it with the proper vaccines, or is it automatically a death sentence?
Yeah, Sean, really good question. And I'm glad that you mentioned the vaccine there. And vaccinated animals on trials should, in theory, not be as severely affected and shouldn't have such high mortalities. We have got herds that have been vaccinated, but either too late, or the cold chain's been broken in the vaccine, or the strains just haven't been effective to the strains that are going around. So there are herds that were vaccinated 8 days before getting infected, and some being vaccinated 10 to 20 days after showing their first symptoms. And those animals, unfortunately, you might as well not have vaccinated them at all. Mortalities are pretty high. In calves, it can go up to about 70%. In the dairies, it can go up to about 10 to 15%. But you are having to shoot a lot of them out the system because they just do not recover from their symptoms. So mortalities on its own is not a massive it's not the biggest cost, but there are a whole lot of animals that get extremely sick. You treat them for months, and then you end up shooting them because it's just inhumane to keep them alive.
Grant, what are you seeing from your side? From a game perspective, a wildlife perspective, when Cape Buffalo, for example, contract or their carriers, and there's an outbreak like this, what's the lethality like on the game side of things?
When you say legality, are you asking what actions can be taken towards government?
No, lethality.
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, sure. No, as long as we only have SAT 1, 2, and 3 in the country. The game species are fine. A lot of them don't show symptoms. You don't even know that they have been infected. Buffalo, also, you don't see it. We have a number of properties that have become infected. Buffalo populations have become infected from cattle populations that surround these properties, and we've seen no symptoms. Not to say that it doesn't happen. I can only share what we've seen, and it's I think because it's SAT 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, the authorities are very worried about the strains that don't occur in South Africa, like ONA, if I'm correct, Emma, and they could be a lot more lethal on species that aren't accustomed to them. So if we land up getting OA into the country, we might find that we have a different result. But right now, from my observations and from what I've seen, properties that are positive for foot and mouth, we haven't seen any deaths or problems at this stage.
Well, that's definitely a good thing. So this whole thing kind of gets started, like I said, I gave you some background. I had a friend in the Eastern Cape that sent me some pictures and some video that were circling on some of the farmers WhatsApp groups, and then I had another farmer friend in KZN that I reached out to, and they kind of confirmed. But can you just tell us, like, where are we right now? So I made that post on social media, which is how I came to know Emma, and Emma put us together. But I got a lot of backlash on that video, and it was, hey, this is bullshit. This isn't happening. This isn't a real thing. This is propaganda. It's not propaganda. This is a real damn thing. What are you guys seeing on the ground right now? What province is it in? How's it moving?
So I think until it affects you, you don't speak up on it. As Grant says, he's been dealing with this since 2021, and we've barely known about it. We knew that there was a DMA, which is a disaster management area, but it's been pretty ineffective towards us. So we haven't been speaking about it. But in June last year, it started hitting our dairy farmers in Gauteng and in KZN, and it's run absolutely rampant since then. It is the whole way through South Africa. The government, the minister did a speech yesterday, and he said the only province that hasn't had it yet was Northern. I just want to get my facts straight here. It was the Northern Territory somewhere. But Mpumalanga's got it, Limpopo's got it, Gauteng's got it, Eastern Cape's got it, Western Cape's got it, KZN's got it. Western Cape hasn't been as bad. It hasn't spread there as hectically yet. I think they only had one case. But everywhere else in South Africa, it's running wild. The consumer doesn't know about it. The government's not responding to us or talking about it. I think unless you're directly affected by it and you're a farmer, you don't know about it, which is what we're trying to change.
What are the farmers experiencing right now? So just talk us through it. If you get a herd that gets infected, what does it look like on the ground for the farmer?
That varies depending on what species you are farming with. If you are a dairy farmer, first you will see a significant milk drop, probably about 5 days before you see your first symptom. Then you will see cows with their tongues hanging out and drooling. Then you will see mouth lesions, teeth lesions, sore feet, and then you'll get the severe mastitis and a blowtorch look to your teeth. And then your calves also obviously die. There's a thing called the tiger heart disease, and a lot of the calves are dying from that. Calves essentially just have a heart attack. So they look healthy, and then next minute they're dead. If you're a beef farmer, typically you'll see your cows looking a little bit sore. You'll see your calves dying either in a mass amount or one or two. It varies from farm to farm, and we're trying to see what the correlation is between those. If you're a pig farmer, you'll lose up to 80 to 90% of your litter, which is massively severe. The protocol is that as you notice a symptom, you need to let the state know. I've got a client who started his foot and mouth outbreak last week, Saturday. He let the state know on Monday, and he's been blue ticked and still hasn't heard from them about when they're coming to test his herd, when they're coming to confirm he's got it, or when they're going to come and vaccinate. So it's just part of what we have to do, but there's no massive help from it. And then your milk and your mortalities and the sickness will last generally about 20 to 30 days. Day 5 to 18 seems to be your worst. And then you start recovering thereafter, but there are some animals that just do not recover.
My next question was going to be is how bad is the spread of it? But you've already answered that. In my initial research, I knew of 3 provinces, and then obviously as this past week and a half has gone by, I found out that it's everywhere. But that's the hard part about it, right? Because I'm sitting here in another country, and I'm struggling to find information. If it wasn't for folks like you that are willing to share, I'd have had no idea how bad it is. And especially Emma, your company's done a really good job of getting that information out there. But to Western society here, we don't have a fucking clue. Pardon my French, but we don't have a clue what's going on. We just don't. And it looks to me like, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but why don't we know about it? And why don't residents of South Africa know about it? I mean, you'd think if this was in the U.S., this would be on every news headline at every run 3 times a day. It would just be tiled across there.
And I think there are a couple of reasons that one needs to look at. So historically, beef cows weren't as badly affected. So it was seen as a white man's dairy disease, essentially. And we've only got about 800 dairy farmers left in South Africa. So if you look at our population of 70 million, whatever it is, we've got 800 people that are crying about it, and everyone else has been unaffected. The pig guys have now started being affected. The beef guys have now started being affected. And the communal farmers and emerging farmers are now being affected. And every time we've thought of stepping up and talking about it, the government or one of our associations has spoken up and said, this is what we're doing, and this is the hope that we give you. So we say, okay, cool. Don't talk about it. Don't worry about it. The government or the organizations are doing something. Then a week or 2 later, you realize the devastation of no longer having that hope because they have not done what they said that they would. And then they give you a little bit more hope on saying that they're doing something else. So we started talking about this in about February last year on should we be making a noise? Should we be campaigning? And each time someone was doing something. And I think nobody wants to be the one that steps out and gets shot. So metaphorically, so we've all been waiting. And eventually when half of our farmers, we represent 54% of KwaZulu-Natal's milk with our farmers, and then a whole lot of the beef farmers too. And we've got to a point where pretty much half of our farmers are infected, and it's coming around for round 2, for round 3. So it's not one of those things that you get it once and you can now breathe because it's done. And now we're enraged. We are distraught. We are desperate. We are disgusted at the way that the government has handled it. And we've decided now we need to have a voice and get this out there so that we force their hand in doing what their job is. Because it's a state-controlled disease, we are not allowed to vaccinate our cows without them. We are not allowed to do a whole lot of things without them doing it for us.
Explain to me how that works. Coming from the U.S. and I grew up in the beef business. We vaccinate our own cattle. We don't wait on the government to tell us when to vaccinate or when to worm or when to cook it. We do it all ourselves. So that's different to me to hear that. Explain to me how that works exactly.
Good question. So every other vaccine in our country, we go to the co-op or to our vet. We ask them if we can please check the cold chain to make sure that has been kept. We then buy the vaccine or order it in advance. We take it home, we inject our animals, and we're done. We log it on our system so that we've got some traceability and we are able to control everything else. For some reason, foot and mouth is the only one, I stand to be corrected, but to the best of my knowledge, is the only vaccine that state has to come. They have to source it, they have to administer it, and you're not allowed to do anything without them. Brucellosis, for example, falls under the exact same act. And in legislation, the legislation was created in 1980. So it's super outdated. For some reason, brucellosis, it's under the same act, but you're allowed to go and buy either S19 or RB51, which is the two different strains of brucellosis, and you're allowed to inject yourself. And actually, it's a legal requirement that you inject once a year and that you inject anthrax once a year. For some reason, foot and mouth has not advanced to that stage of government saying, okay, guys, get these vaccines. These are the suppliers that we trust. These are the ones that are tested. Get them and do this yourself and get this under control, which in my opinion is the only way that we're going to stop this thing, is if private vets or farmers are able to source from the correct suppliers that have been verified and tested and inject ourselves. Farmers are willing to pay for it, but state will not let us yet.
That's crazy. That blows my mind how that's even a thing there. I mean, just knowing that I can run down to my co-op vet store that's 2 blocks away from where I'm talking to you right now and get anything I need within a moment's notice. It's crazy to think that, and I don't get the why behind it, why the government would want to do that and try to interject. And I mean, it seems like normal maintenance, like you would want to do anyway if the vaccines are available. And that's another thing we can talk about too, are the vaccine rollouts. And what I've been seeing is there's been all these promises made and the vaccines are still not there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So historically, you've only been able to vaccinate if you are an infected herd, which is super counterproductive because that's not how a vaccine works. A vaccine is there to build the immunity of your herd so that when the virus gets to you, your herd is able to fight it. But because there was such a shortage of vaccine, they were prioritizing animals that were already clinically infected. So what would happen is if you had a symptom, you would call your state vet. In 2 or 3 or 5 days' time, if it wasn't Christmas or New Year or Easter or they were on leave, they would come out, verify that your animals had foot and mouth. At one stage, the state vets would decide if your animals were sick enough and if you had enough clinical symptoms to qualify for a vaccine, and at which point you were already sort of 15 days into your outbreak and almost on the other end of it. They would then come if there was vaccine available. So first they had to bleed your herd, send those bloods to OP, which is one of our state vet facilities. OP would then take 7 to 21 days to get back to you on whether your herd was positive or not. If you were positive from those bloods, state would then come and inject your herd if there was vaccine available. They then, in November, decided that actually this wasn't working. The fire has run. Keep in mind that this outbreak's been happening since 2021. November 25, they decided that we could preemptively vaccinate. So, which meant that if you were in a 10K radius of an infected farm, if there was vaccine available, they would come and vaccinate your herds. Then vaccine became even less in the country. So they said they dropped that to a 2K radius. If you were within a 2K radius, they would vaccinate your herds. But generally speaking, your herd was already infected and incubating by the time they got injected. And that overloads the immune system and the animals get sicker. With the new laws now, Steenhuisen, our minister, has said that they will roll out mass vaccinations. Only the director of animal health can sign off on this vaccine, and there is none in the country. So before Steenhuisen's talk yesterday, he said that they were going to be bringing in 1 million doses a month, which comes to about 12 million a year. We've got about 14 million cattle in the country, let alone the sheep, the goats, the pigs. But the vaccine that we're bringing in from Botswana only lasts 3 months, which means essentially we need 56 million doses to cover our cow population alone. And they were talking about 12 million. They have now changed it that they're going to get vaccine in from Turkey, from Argentina, continue with bots, and get from ARC, which is a massive improvement, but still not enough vaccine. And I'm battling to see how they're going to roll this out. They haven't sent bloods to Pirbright, which is a lab in the UK, which can then match our strains to any major lab in the world. And any major lab would then be able to create us the correct vaccine for our correct strain. And Steenhuisen apparently sent out an urgent request for the ARC to send bloods last year, and they are still preparing the samples now. Productivity
and efficiency are 2 words that I don't associate with your government, unfortunately. And I think especially now with what's going on, politically throughout the world, there's a brighter light that's being shined on South Africa. But and I want to go into this too. So you mentioned the minister's plan. Now you guys have been begging for this for a while, and so the minister finally came out yesterday. He released his plan. I stayed up till past midnight last night going through everything that I could find, every post. I want to say that 95% or more of the people that had something to say about it was not good. Everybody questioned it. Everybody, the legitimacy of the plan actually working and the availability of the vaccine was just nobody. I feel like nobody believes that what the plan that he put forth is going to work. What are y'all's thoughts?
I think the first thing to note is that he has made massive progress in his thinking from last month, which I'm really grateful for. And kudos to him for listening to his task team. He put a task team together of amazing vets, amazing specialists, brilliant brains last year, June, I think it was. And by the end of December, he had not listened to a single thing that they had recommended. Whereas now he's taking those things seriously. So I am very grateful for the change that he has made, that we can now start looking at Argentina, Turkey, all of these different countries for the vaccines. But I don't think it's enough. I think it's too little, too late. This horse has bolted. I don't see him controlling this. They've projected a plan of a 10-year turnaround to get foot and mouth free in our country. And he wants to vaccinate 80% of the high-risk areas in the next 12 months. By then, a whole bunch of our farmers are going to be out of business. I've had farmers that have had it the first time. They can almost handle it. The banks have to show up. They're in a whole lot of debt. They've lost, call it 6 million rand per 1,000 cows per outbreak in 3 weeks. And that's not profit that they're losing. That's off their income, and they aren't able to service that debt. Second round cripples them. So if it's taking him 12 months to get around to all those farms, I would say more than half of them are going to be out of business, which is then going to affect the consumer. We're not going to have milk on our shelves. We're not going to have meat in our freezers. Some of the real retailers have already said that they want to start importing milk because we're going to have such a massive shortage with this foot and mouth outbreak. And that's going to be absolutely crippling to our farmers, to our communities, to the secondary industries, and to the consumer.
Nothing you said there sounds good. I want to go back just briefly. You talked about biosecurity, and I want to go back because it's super important. I don't think people understand what exactly biosecurity is, and I want to tackle it both from a farm perspective and a game farm perspective because people need to understand. Okay, once this thing happens, there are severe restrictions that go into place once a herd or a farm has popped positive for it.
I think, Grant, do you want to start with that? And then I'll follow up with how it affects the dairies or the farms and how they're dealing with it.
Yeah, Sean, Emma and I spoke about this a little earlier today. And it's a difficult one to quantify. So there are probably 3 ways that a game rancher is able to utilize his product. It's live sales, where he sells animals live to somebody else who's in need of animals, or he sells animals as hunting packages for people to come and hunt, or he has a tourism operation where people come and look at the animals. So from a tourist point of view, because the disease doesn't necessarily kill the game and the animal that he's farming with, we find that tourism remains, that the photographics take place and it all happens. A farm that is positive on within our legislation as it stands at the moment, and it's legislation that will have to be changed moving forward if we're going to start vaccinating, because you can't differentiate between a vaccinated animal and an animal that's been infected. So you're unable to determine, so the law has to change to facilitate that. But presently, as the law stands, a farm that is positive for foot and mouth, the only way you can remove a product off that farm is dead. And once it's dead, it's got to be cooked or dried. So we have biltong, equivalent to your jerky, which has to be, you've got to be able to break. It's got to be dry enough that you're able to break it when you checking the dryness. So that's the only way that, according to law, you are able to remove your product from your property. Now, if you come back to what I said a little earlier about buffalo, and buffalo being carriers and remaining carriers forever, once you have a buffalo population on your farm that becomes positive, you are now closed down by law. The only way you can take animals off your property is by cooking them or drying them. And that just makes things very difficult. And you can still trophy hunt, but the product has to, the horns have to go through a special treatment process. But there's no sale of meat. And often game farmers, your trophies are a very small percentage of your total population, at 5% probably, and that means you have to remove excess animals in another manner, and it's closed down. So it's if the law is enforced and they don't make concessions, it's going to take the ability of a game farmer to utilize his product. He's not going to be able to bar through photographics and tourism. But when you look at how things have developed over the last 30 years in South Africa, we have this model of sustainable utilization, which is enabled, and it's enabled by the private ownership of wildlife. So in your country, unlike ourselves, we can own indigenous animals on our properties if our properties are fenced, and it's resulted in an exponential growth in both the industry, but more importantly, the number of animals in private hands, and it's contributed to a form of biosecurity. So we now have not biosecurity, call it species security, where in the past there were animals that were rare and people have bred them up. But the backbone of a lot of these breeding farms is buffalo. So all that progress and all that that's been made over the last 30 years could be unfold tomorrow if those herds become infected with those buffalo herds become infected with foot and mouth, and you then close down. You're done. You can't utilize your animals. We also battling a little bit at the moment on that these call them tourist destinations or photographic destinations normally carry more predators than is sustainable, and they need to then every now and then supplement their population of prey species on their properties to make sure that they are able to sustain the amount of predators, because predators is what brings the tourist to your property. And within our immediate area, as I said, we are in a disease management area, and we've been so since 2021. And we are now a point where some of these properties are needing game, and there's been a moratorium on the movement of game. It was only a couple of months ago that they allowed us to bring animals from disease-free areas, in other words, areas that haven't been infected, into the DMA, and that caused consternation. So right now we can bring animals in, but we're also not quite sure where to get them, because at this stage, for whatever reason, we as in the private sector or within the sector see all sorts of posts and news articles about how this is spreading, but the amount of legislation, so the area is meant to be legislated as a disease management area. At the moment, there's a foot and mouth outbreak, but I feel that perhaps it's just, as Emma says, the horse is bolted, and if they have to start declaring these disease management areas where there's extra, the laws are more stringent or designed to try and curtail the spread of a disease, suddenly you have a problem. And I mean, we had some of our animals vaccinated, and as the law stands at the moment, and Emma did tell me that there are concessions that have been made, but up until now, if you had vaccinated your cattle, the only place you could sell them was to slaughter. So that begs the question: if you vaccinate the whole country, they're obviously going to have to change that law. Otherwise, you're going to slaughter your breeding herd, and that's a worry. But from a game point of view, I've explained the 3 avenues, and so right now the biggest risk is buffalo becoming positive. Once those buffalo are positive, you're done. You can't utilize that herd.
Emma, before you go, if I can, Grant, if you don't mind, I just want to play devil's advocate for just a second. So and I want to make the distinction between a game breeder and what I would consider a game ranch, and that, there's hunting operations or phototourism that goes on. Those are, in my mind, those are 2 different things. They can be one and the same, but primarily, somebody that specializes in game breeding, especially specific species like buffalo or kudu or something like that, is going to be different than a game farm where you go hunt. So if I'm the game breeder, for example, and I have an inclination that I've got foot and mouth in my buffalo herd, why would I call the government to test them? If they're not going to die, why would I say anything about it?
Well, firstly, at this stage in South Africa, you're unable to move any buffalo that's not been tested. So to be able to move buffalo, you test for foot and mouth, brucella, a Theileria called corridor disease, and there's a 4th one, I can't think of it now. Did I say brucella? So legally, you're unable to move buffalo without those tests being done. So if you do have a herd and you want to move those animals legally, they're going to come and test your buffalo. You're not going to get away with it. So it doesn't pay you to do that. You can. But I think that these questions I need clear answers when you ask them. A person has to give them some thought. Yes, it could mean that people will stop reporting, but it's not only the buffalo that's the issue. It's the game that's on the same property as those buffalo, and that's where the issue comes. And I'm not sure how government's going to handle this. Emma and I were talking about it a little earlier and wondering how they're going to vaccinate cattle. Maybe they're going to create a cordon by vaccinating and maybe stop the spread. But within that cordon, there are areas where there are large game populations, both in your game ranching, as you call it, your game breeding property, and also out there in open properties. And unless they start vaccinating game or stopping the movement of game to try and help enforce this stop the spread, it's going to be pointless. So I haven't heard anything up until now, but I can only imagine that at some stage they're going to have to curtail the movement of wildlife in the way we do it in trucks and trailers, and that which I do hope doesn't happen. There is control at the moment within the disease management area. There's a moratorium on the movement of game. So if they increase the size of the disease management areas, it will just increase the size of areas that you're no longer allowed moving game. They make concessions. You're allowed to move a certain amount of meat. So if you, as a South African biltong hunter, can go to a property, you can shoot one impala, you can debone it, and you can get a permit to move that meat. But you can't go to that property and remove 100, 200 animals and sell it into the commercial system of the cold chain, or go to butcheries. So I'm not sure how that's going to be handled. We'll still see how what they're going to do to curtail the movement of game. But I'm seeing it's my industry. I hope it doesn't happen, but it would be the responsible thing to do.
That was actually perfect. I was aware of the buffalo blood test. I think, is it 2 or 3 different cycles they have to go through before they can be transported?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on what disease you're testing for. So, for example, if you're on a clean area where there's no foot and mouth within 10, 15 kilometers, and the herd is clean, then you just do one test of foot and mouth. When the result comes, you then are able to move the animals. Animals have to be in quarantine. They mustn't have contact with other animals in that time. But buffalo, you end up keeping buffalo for whatever reason. Brucella seems to be the test that takes the longest to get results from. And by the time you've got the result and you've got the permits, your buffalo will be held in captivity for 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks, depending on who your state vet is and how good they are. And I think also I can only imagine now that buffalo testing, because it's not essential. In other words, I don't see the reason that the farmer wanting to sell his buffalo as being important, more important than the national herd health of the country. I would imagine that those samples get put to the back of the queue at OVR where they get tested, or get the lab that they get processed in. So I haven't heard of anybody at this stage. This outbreak has occurred in the last, not the outbreak, the sudden spread has been in the last, what would you say, 4 or 5 months, somewhere around there, Emma. And it's not. It's not. This summer is not traditionally a time that game gets moved in South Africa. The animals are all calving and lambing, and it's hot, and it doesn't lend itself to moving animals. So the impact of this increased burden on those labs will only come to bear now when the season opens and people start trying to move their buffalo. Some people, some state vets believe that they have no problem with people wanting to move buffalo because it's a way of, it's sentinels. So if you've got herds out there that normally are not tested and the guy wants to sell his buffalo, suddenly the state has the ability to decide or find out what the status of his herd is by him wanting to sell. So they're not against it because it gives them ability to do a survey, if I could put it that way. And but I think as time goes on, I really do believe, and I mentioned it to Emma early on today, that I believe just because buffalo don't shed the disease, because they're carriers, it's paramount that these populations, people practice biosecurity. They vaccinate the herds of bovine animals that would possibly transfer foot and mouth to these buffalo herds. They should have cordons of vaccine around them, because it's unlike cattle. Once they're positive forever. Your cattle, you can get through it. You will have your losses, and then you recover. With the buffalo, once they become positive, your neighbors can continually be reinfected from that herd of buffalo until such stage that the buffalo are either removed or the status of the area changes to a foot-mouth area. So the repercussions are huge.
Grant, let me ask you one more question. It'll be in 2 parts, and then I want to go back to Emma. So buffalo are tested. Are there any other game animals that you do game capture, so you're constantly moving animals, whether it's kudu, impala, blessbuck, hemsbuck, whatever? Are there any other animals that are tested, or is it primarily just buffalo that are tested?
Yeah, according to law, buffalo, obviously every single buffalo in the country has to be tested. Game is not tested. There's in our clean area, so the country is divided into 4 different zones. You have your foot and mouth zones, and in other words, where you have foot and mouth present. Kruger National Park, good example. Then you have the properties against Kruger National Park, and they are what they call them. Sorry, the name's just left me now, but it's I mentioned to you earlier, Emma, that area between the Troll. Yeah, it's a buffer zone, but it's a surveillance zone. So they have surveillance zone without vaccination as your second. So primarily it's your foot and mouth area. Next area against that foot and mouth area would be surveillance without vaccine. Those animals can't be moved. As the animals in your foot and mouth area can't be moved. Then you have the surveillance area with vaccine. So in other words, what's happening around the properties that they're trying to create the buffers, that's surveillance with vaccine. And then you have clean areas. So you up until now, the buffer surveillance area with vaccine, no movement. This recent outbreak. Prior to that surveillance zone without vaccine, you could put the animals into quarantine, put them in test for foot and mouth, keep them for 21 days isolated. 21 days later, and they say 21 days because, as I say, it's just a safety margin to get over the 14-day incubation period. So 21 days, you bleed again, and you check with that. And only once that comes back as negative are you then able to perhaps move the animals if the state vet in that area is happy that your biosecurity has been up to scratch around your quarantine facility. So no, in the majority of South Africa, which is a clean area, there's no form of surveillance or testing that takes place for game.
Emma, can you let's circle back around to biosecurity. So from a domestic livestock perspective, what does that look like for a normal beef ranch or dairy farmer? What does it look like on the ground?
Yeah, Sean. So there are obviously different levels of biosecurity. The big one is spraying of vehicles and having dips that you drive through with chemicals in them to kill whatever is on your vehicle. Foot baths, making sure that absolutely anyone who comes onto the farm, whether it's your staff, your children, your friends, your industry people, they all need to either change shoes or foot bath. And usually the industry would change shoes and foot bath before going onto farms. If someone has been on a positive farm, they are not allowed onto another farm for at least 4 days because it could be harbored in your nasal tract. So if you've been working with animals, you are at risk of then spreading it to another animal. Staff are encouraged to stay on the farm so that they aren't going back into the locations, into contact with any other animals. But obviously, you can't restrict the movement of people going back to their families. So those staff, you would hopefully get them to shower in, change clothes, dip in, and not work with your animals for 2 or 3 or 4 days after having worked with their own animals back home. Movement of animals, you don't want to be bringing in any animals onto your farm, especially right now with this outbreak, regardless of where they are from. So making sure that you're not buying in animals. Obviously, stud breeders, we have got some of the best genetics and some of the best farmers arguably in the world, and new genetics need to come into your herd. So those animals you would quarantine. Anything new you buy in would need to be quarantined for 21 to 28 days. And that is part of legislation. I think it was signed in 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong, Grant. And legislation says that you have to quarantine. You would want to chat to your neighbors and discuss systems with neighbors and communities. A lot of the communities have got spray buffers and dips on the roadways. So anyone coming into that community or that district, their cars would be disinfected on the road as well as going onto farms.
So how do you broached it in my mind, always kind of goes there. So you've got all this farm staff, right? And some of the farm staff, in some cases, lots of the farm staff live on the farm in South Africa. That's not unusual. However, these people still are going to go to town. They're still going to go to market. They're still going to go to doctor. You can't keep them on that farm. They go there, and especially bigger towns, I've seen it, especially on the weekend, where all of a sudden this place that sees very little people is now this giant hustle and bustling metropolis with all these people on the weekend. You can't stop people from doing that. So that's got to be a nightmare.
Absolutely, Sean. And it's a human right to be able to move, to be able to see people, to be able to do what you need to do. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the spread comes as well. I mentioned earlier the cultural events. A lot of the cultural events include slaughtering of cattle. by your family, by your community. So if there's an infected animal that you have now slaughtered, often the people will wear that skin around their waists or around their wrists, and that skin can be infected. So if they've now come from a cultural event, come home, and now milking your cows, for example, that's one way of spreading it. And it's not about a black versus a white versus an Indian. This disease does not discriminate. It does not discriminate by age or class. And it's, if you went to a Christmas function on a neighboring farm or a farm 3 districts away, and they then had an outbreak a week later that you didn't know about at the time, chances are you've moved it home with you too.
As you're saying this, I have flashbacks of COVID and everybody wearing masks.
Yeah, Sean, I think if we could put masks on cows and people, it would be a laugh. And yeah, it's a really tough one to control. And I had a laugh during the minister's talk yesterday where he said biosecurity cattle movement is the only way that this thing is spreading. And it's not. Unfortunately, where you've got people, where you've got freeways, where you've got community gatherings. I was looking at my kids' school car park this morning. Half the cars that we're dropping off, they have got foot and mouth on their farms at the moment. So we could be picking it up in the school car park. Getting a technician in to fix your milking machine. Any of those things are big risk. And yes, we are spraying vehicles, we are changing shoes, we are showering between farms, we're doing whatever we can. But this virus it's horrific.
Going back to the vaccine plan that the minister announced, what are the projected rollout dates? So when can farmers expect to start seeing vaccines and in enough quantity to do something useful?
Yeah, Sean. So the minister was pretty vague on that, and that is one of the questions that we have asked him. He said that the ARC has managed to bring their manufacturing date early for us and provide us with 12,000 doses by mid-February. To put that into perspective, that will treat
12,000.
12,000, not 12 million. And I did double check that. 12,000 doses will be ready the middle of February, which, to put that into perspective, will vaccinate 1, maybe 2 of our farmers' herds. The Argentina vaccine, he has said, is ready. They are ready to send 1 million doses now and another 5 million in. Let me make sure I've got this right. I think it was in March. So the first 1 million are ready as soon as the permits have been issued. And the Section 21 permit that needs to be issued, we had submitted to them in the beginning of December for a signature to bring in the turkey vaccines, and that still hasn't been signed. So Minister says that he will have it signed by Monday this coming week, which we will hold him to account on. Once that is done, 2 weeks after that, we will have 1 million doses from Argentina. And then in March, another 5 million doses by March 26. There is another 1 million doses ready coming from Dolvet in Turkey. But to the best of my knowledge, there is a 3-month waiting period on that. And we have asked them asked the minister why there's a waiting period on Turkey and not on Argentina, and assuming it has something to do with BRICS and our agreements there. But that's purely my assumption, and we're waiting on a response for that. And then BVI, which the Botswana one, they had committed to 2 million doses in January and then 1 million doses thereafter per month, and they have not been able to do that. The BVI lab has said that they've got the SAT2 ready for us and that they should be able to send in Feb or March, but we've got SAT1, SAT2, and SAT3. So by injecting with just SAT2, you may be covering 1/3 of your strains, and that only lasts for 3 months. So, and then another thing that I must mention is that none of these have been viral matched. So one of my questions to the minister was, if Argentina has already created these vaccines without our bloods, how do we know that they are effective against our strains? And we are waiting for an answer on that.
That's a great point. Yeah, how do you know? And one other thing, and just so I found this in some of the research. Did I read somewhere that there's also on top of the vaccine, there's 3 monthly boosters in some zones that are going to be required as well? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that depends on which vaccine you get. The turkey vaccine is an annual vaccine. The BVI vaccine is every 3 months you've got to booster it. And I'm not sure about the Argentina one. To the best of my knowledge, you've got a booster at 6 months for your first one and then annually thereafter. but I stand to be corrected on that.
Looking at this from way above, I read through the minister's press release. It sounds good. It feels risky, but my question is, this is essentially a 10-year phase plan. How does it help right now? It seems like these rollouts are going to take time. By the time they get there, is it too late? And I don't want to be a pessimist, but this is what I'm seeing.
It is a big concern of mine, Sean. And the other concern is this actually going to happen? In October, they told us that next week we would have 1 million doses, and we're still waiting. So the first thing is, every meeting that we've had with them, we have had such hope and then devastation because they have not fulfilled what they have committed to. So that is a concern. Are they going to do that? And then the second concern is this too little, too late? Are our farmers still going to be in business in the next 12 months by the time they get their 80% coverage, or 10 years' time by the time they've vaccinated the whole herd and hopefully we're through it? I don't know that we will still have producers in business.
I read that the minister said that he instructed the ARC to send field strains to Pibright, and the vaccines will have full antigenic matching. But then he admitted that the samples are still being prepared and they've not actually been sent yet. So there's a whole lot of conjecture, right? There's a bunch of what ifs, especially from a time perspective of when this stuff is going to be readily available to these farmers who seem like they're in desperate need right now.
Absolutely. And our milk producers organization in South Africa has been talking to state about sending bloods to Pibright for close on a year. Legally, we're supposed to be submitting bloods not just for foot and mouth, but for multiple different diseases every single year to these institutions, so that if there is an outbreak, the World Animal Health Organization can step in for us and they're able to supply us with vaccine. And there's just been absolutely no urgency. It's been very poorly managed. And I think state needs to be held liable for that.
That's moving into, and this will go to the game side too, Grant, a little bit. So let's talk about export, for example. So from an export perspective, if these herds have been vaccinated, once they've been vaccinated, they're going to carry trace markers of the disease for the rest of their life. So are they then non-exportable animals?
With the BVI vaccine that we've had at the moment, that only has cover for 3 months, it does not have a DIVA marker in it. So after 3 months, if you test that animal, she has got no immunity left and you cannot pick it up. If they have been clinically sick, after 6 to 8 months, that immunity is gone and you cannot pick up that animal had foot and mouth. So from an export perspective of having that marker, you can't pick that up, but you can just register as a foot and mouth free herd with vaccination, like Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay. There are a whole lot of countries that Paraguay has got a 96% export of their beef. So very little of it stays in the country. And they vaccinate absolutely everything every single year. So all it is a tick box at the bottom of your form that we are now a vaccinated country, not a foot and mouth free with no vaccine country. So in theory, export shouldn't be massively affected. Our minister yesterday kept talking about these trade deals that he's hoping to open up. But to be honest, I don't think we're going to have any product to trade. We're not going to have any people left that are still producing if we are so worried about this trade and this export.
And you went into my next question, what's that going to look like? And you hit the nail on the head. If there's no animals to export and you don't even have enough to feed your own country, why you're not going to be exporting? And what does that look like for milk production? And let's talk about milk and meat production. And Grant, I am going to come back because I've got something for you that I think is going to be good for some of our viewers. But from a milk and meat perspective in country, from a consumer standpoint, once the cattle has been infected, for example, beef cow, let's talk beef cows first. Beef cow's been infected. They don't end up dying for whatever reason. Can then they still be sent to the abattoir and commercially put out to the public?
The legislation says that if you are positive or if you have been vaccinated, you get a day 0 on, if you're clinical, it would be on your last symptom. The state vet would then come out and say, okay, cool, I don't see any more symptoms in this herd, so I'll now give you a day 0. Or if you haven't had clinical cases, then your vaccine date is your day 0. You are then in quarantine for a full 12 months from that date, or longer if state hasn't come to you to give you a day zero yet. I've got some farmers that had foot and mouth 3 or 4 months ago. They still have not been given their day zero because state still hasn't come out to give it to them. So they are going to be in quarantine for 16, 18, 20 months before they can legally trade animals again. Once you have got your day zero, you have to wait 6 weeks before you can send to a registered foot and mouth abattoir. You have to get Red Cross permits in order to do that. And the registered foot and mouth abattoirs, they have to destroy the bone, the head, the tongue, and the offal, which is the fifth quarter. So your price that you end up getting for those animals is a quarter of what you usually would. They've generally been sick, so they've lost weight. And you generally get maybe 1,000 Rand for that, which is absolutely nothing and probably not worth your transport there. Once you've passed that 6-week mark, from 6 weeks to 6 months, you can then apply for permits to be able to send to certain abattoirs. And then from 6 months to a year, you can supply any abattoir but with the correct Red Cross permits. So there is some area that you can move animals with that state approval, but to hold on to animals for an extra 6 months before you sell them is massive, massive cost. Our emerging farmers, they rely on stockful, which is a community sale at the end of each year over Christmas. There are a bunch of people at every month they put in a certain amount of money, and then at the end of the year they'll go and buy an animal. And most of our emerging farmers hold on to their animals for 12 months for stockful, and this year they haven't been able to sell them. So you're now creating a problem of livelihoods. They rely on that money for school fees, to feed their families, to live. You're now restricting that by saying that they cannot sell animals for 12 months. First of all, they don't have stockpiled food. They cannot keep those animals and feed them, but they also cannot go without that money. So you then get this illegal selling of animals. Anything that isn't showing a symptom, you just pretend that it hasn't been sick, which is obviously then spreading our disease as well.
I just want to clarify a point. You said roughly 1,000 Rand is what the farmer can potentially get. And just to our American audience that's not familiar with the conversion, that's about $50 US. So imagine you selling your beef for $50 a head. That's asinine, ridiculous. You're going to lose everything. And that goes into this is going to bankrupt farmers if it hasn't already. How can it not?
Absolutely, Sean, and that is what we are shouting about. There is such an urgency for this, and government doesn't seem to see that. They have said, there is a fire coming, it is a big fire, let's see if we can please get you guys some water over the next 12 months. But then your house and all your neighbors' houses have burnt down, and there is nothing that you can do about that. My dad did an interview with Biz News this last week with me, and he used such a beautiful analogy of the legislation for the non-farmers is essentially your neighbor's house is burning down. First of all, you have to let the state know that their house is burning down. They will then come out in a couple of days' time to verify that there's a fire. Once they've done that, they'll say, okay, cool, let me find you some water, which will take probably another week. They will then say to you, okay, can you afford this water? We found you water, but you need to pay for the water. By the time they get there, that fire has spread through your entire community and burnt every single house in your town. And not only do they not get you the water, but if you get your own water to put onto that fire or somehow find water, you are then prosecuted.
There's going to be profound economic impacts too. The way I'm understanding this is, it's going to be impossible for the farmers to sell beef or to sell milk at some point in time. They're not going to be able to cover their fees. They're going to end up going bankrupt. What then, if the government doesn't stop what they're doing, jump in and help right now? How does this not go into, hey, we're outsourcing, we're importing all of our beef and all of our milk now to support, however many million people live in South Africa because we screwed the pooch and weren't reactive enough?
Ultimately, the consumer is going to pay the price. We've already got milk buyers saying that they're looking at bringing in pasteurized milk and powder so that they can fill that surplus. Our consumer, there's already such a massive food security issue in South Africa. There's such massive poverty. There's massive starvation rates. And we're now shooting the farmer in the foot and telling our consumer that they're just going to have to pay more, which unfortunately, I think our whole country is going to be hedging on this, on whether our farmers can survive this. And it's not just the farmers, it's the secondary industries. A lot of our farming communities are based around farming. If that dies, we won't have co-ops, we won't have vets, we won't have fertilizer suppliers, we won't have the processors, and all of those jobs will be lost. And we've already got a job security issue in this country, massive unemployment, and this is just going to aid in doubling that, tripling it. And I'm hugely concerned. So it's not just a farmer issue, it's a consumer issue. It's any employed person anywhere in any of the industries in South Africa is massively at risk.
The minister closed yesterday in conceding that the success of his plan depends on the urgent legislative review and government essentially getting off their ass and doing it now. Can you trust the governing body, specifically the ANC, to do what the fuck they're supposed to do to get this out there and get this taken care of?
Sean, it's not just the ANC anymore. We've got the ANC and the DA that have all joined into a group party. And I'm not particularly hopeful in any of them, to be honest. Too many meetings have been had where promises have been made and not fulfilled. And I really pray that that has changed. I see that Dr. Maja is no longer on this task force, and she is the one that's supposed to be signing off on that, so that maybe there have been some changes, maybe they'd heard our pleas, and I'm praying that those changes are going to be for the good. But I don't think they know what urgent means. And I see in corporate operations, often there are 15 meetings before a decision is made. As farmers, we make million rand decisions on a daily basis from our bucky window. So for us, urgent means right now. For them, urgent means in a month or two's time if it's not Christmas. And I don't think that's good enough. Just now. Yeah, it's not good enough, unfortunately.
Grant, I want to pivot back to you for a second because I was writing some notes down. I talked to 2 game breeders in the last 2 days. They didn't want to go on record. They were happy having conversations with me. They're scared shitless about what could happen, especially buffalo game breeders right now. The potential impact, not just from a hunting perspective, but these, just like conventional farmers in the beef and milk industry, these game breeders can essentially lose everything, and the value of their herds go down if they can't move these herds. If there's no way for them to hunt them, the meat can't leave. This could ruin tons of people on the game industry side. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think you got a good point there, and I think it's what I was alluding to earlier when I was saying that it's my biggest fear that these buffalo herds become infected. I mean, you can imagine some provinces there's a buffalo herd every farm for 50 kilometers, and then there might be a 50-kilometer break, but there'll be another herd and another herd and another herd. And if those herds all become infected, how do you ever get back your status as a foot and mouth free country? And not only that, those poor farmers, for no fault of their own, I mean, they've done everything that they have to do to secure their herds. They test animals when animals come in, they test animals when the animals go out, and at no fault of their own, their herd could become infected. And basically, that herd will become the value, if you're going to remove it, of a biltong stick. In other words, that's the only avenue you have to remove. Nobody can put up a abattoir and a ability to tin meat on a property. And so I just hope that I mean, I think, all these plans are to eradicate foot and mouth. I mean, Emma's talking about the vaccines and securing the dairy farms and that. But a game farmer whose buffalo herd becomes positive is then he's red. He can never ever become anything else but remain a red area. And as I mentioned to you early on, the red area is you can't move game out of this. So yeah, it's a worry. It's a huge worry. I don't know whether legislation can be changed to allow that. I suppose it all depends on where the status of the country becomes and what the country decides as a whole. But right now in the legislation as it stands now, that buffalo farmer loses everything.
Yeah, and from a game perspective, I'm fortunate that I do see the auction prices and what things are selling at. So you're talking to people that don't understand. You're talking about animals that are selling breeding stock for millions and millions of rand per head an animal in some cases. So the economic loss to a game breeder, it's insurmountable. There's no way to bounce back from that. You've got everything in the world, just like a conventional farmer does. Everything's invested in those animals, and if they lose their value, you're screwed. And that leads me to something else. You made mention of it before, but I think it's important for our Western audience to understand the value in a game animal on a typical hunting safari is the trophy fees are a very small part of what that animal brings. The trophy alone cannot sustain the operation. There's a secondary market for these animals in that they go to the arbiter and the meat has value. However, especially in the case of buffalo, like we just talked, if there's no value in the meat, even the game farmers then, or excuse me, the outfitters are going to start losing their ass too, because there's no secondary value to it. So they're paying for an animal at, call it $10,000 US, turning around and selling it for $12,000, but they were expecting to get $5,000 for the value of the meat, round numbers. That's not going to happen now. If that herd, is been infected, there's no value and they're screwed essentially.
Yeah, I mean, South Africans are quite resilient, and we'll always make a plan, and we'll somehow survive. But it's going to put a lot of pressure on that sector of our industry, and it's where it probably right now would be to a game farmer's benefit not to own a buffalo, because of the possibility of that buffalo becoming foot and mouth positive and losing his herd. So right now, just the fact that you own a buffalo puts a lot of pressure on you, and that's causes enough anxiety on its own. And I definitely think that the hunting industry will make it, but it will change the figures considerably. And, as I mentioned early on, that this unique model of ownership of indigenous species that we have here in Southern Africa has been a catalyst for a huge amount of biodiversity that's been secured, because people can farm game in marginal areas where they can't farm other forms of agriculture. And this just puts pressure on that whole model. And the industry supports a lot of people in these way out areas. There's no industry. There is no other form of employment. The farming sector is what creates that employment, as does part of that farming sector is the game ranching industry. And if the game ranch is unable to survive, then it means there's going to be a lot of people out of work. So it's got huge ramifications all around. You use the outfitter as an example. You probably have to employ 2 less guides or 2 less trackers, so it impacts. So yeah, it will have an impact.
Or that $12,000 US buffalo price tag just went to $30,000 US or $20,000 US to cover it.
Yeah, exactly. The market is obviously determined. There's ceilings and things like that. But yes, and when you go to those type of prices, is less of you guys that are going to come out here and help assist us in making a living and securing future conservation areas. So I agree with you, and there's always a repercussion, and it's just whether we can get through it. That's going to be the question.
moving on just a little bit, and it's so hard to move from one topic to the next because it's such an important issue, and not only for conventional agriculture, but a lot of our base, the way we started, because we hunt internationally, and especially in South Africa. So a lot of our viewers are familiar with our travels over there and what we do, but we've made friends there for years and years and years. I spend 6 to 9 weeks in country every single year, and I bring groups with me, and it has the potential to be devastating. So I want people to understand this is not just a beef or a dairy issue. This can actually, if something's not done now and it moves into these the buffalo herds, or they get kudu, gemsbuck, whatever, like the safari industry as we know it as of right now will have to change, and that's going to be to the detriment of international hunters that are coming, because frankly they're not going to be able to come as frequently, or they're not going to be able to harvest as many animals when they come, because it's just not cost effective anymore. And that's a potential that could be really bad for an industry that is what, a billion plus rand industry a year.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now I hear what you're saying. I don't want to be an alarmist. I think thank goodness that we have the ability to still hunt within that foot and mouth area. So you can still utilize 5% of your population, but it doesn't help you with the rest. And so I think from a hunting point of view, I think the product will always be here. I think there will be a change, as you say, but there will always be a safari destination, and we're just not sure yet as to what impact the laws are that you're referring to. I don't like to think that the industry will come to a standstill. I don't believe that. I believe that the guys will make a plan. They'll get around it. But there's definitely there would have been an easier road. And if this had been taken care of a lot earlier, we would have locked this down in a smaller area, cleaned it up, and we wouldn't have the issues we have now. So I believe the safari industry will survive, and it will be here, and South Africa will always be a destination, just maybe under slightly different parameters. The Western world doesn't always understand Africa and what we deal with, and I think that there are lawmakers in other countries that could change their view on what we are. So we've been a foot and mouth free area or recognized as a free area for many years, and that's given Western countries, where most of the hunters originate from, the confidence to be able to write legislation that enables us to move our trophies to those countries. But we have no control over lawmakers in other countries, and we see it all the time. You know what I'm talking about in the industry, how people's whims and their thoughts can influence decision makers in your receiving end countries. So yes, right now in the present situation, it looks like we'll be fine, but who knows what the receiving countries decide in time to go, and what risks they perceive our industry to be. So no, it's not good. But I told you, we South Africans will make a plan.
Well, and Grant, I do agree with you. I think there'll always be hunting. The safari industry will continue to. I think it's going to continue to grow in South Africa for a number of years. And it does go back to, that's one thing about South Africans. You guys are resilient. And when you say make a plan and we chuckle about it, that's exactly how, all of my South African friends think. Like, nah, we're going to figure this out one way or the other. There's not we're just going to let it happen. We're going to figure something out. So it's really something I like about your country too. And South Africans is you guys are you'll always figure it out and make a plan. And some of the toughest people I've ever met in my life. But Emma, moving back over to movement control in laws right now. So what does that mean? So there's movement bans in place, right? But what does that actually mean when you've got native and village style herds that are just free range and on the road? I mean, how does this actually work where you can, or does it not work? Does a movement ban work at all? Does when you're talking about biosecurity, does it work? Or are these just, whimsical, measures that are being taken because they look good? And frankly, they may slow it, but it doesn't stop it. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you explain it to me the way you see it.
So that's a two-part question. The first thing is that biosecurity works and we need to do it. But there is a point where the disease is just too close that you can't biosecurity your way out of it. So we do need to do our part. We do need to put biosecurity measures in place, and everyone needs to do that for it to work. But we're not going to biosecurity our way out of this thing once it's on your neighbor's farm. The second part is, does this movement ban work? We have got massive stock theft issues in this country. And if we can't even stop that, how are we going to stop people moving animals? We've got thousands of animals coming past on the freeways, on the back of buckies, in trucks, in trailers, and they're not being stopped. So the minister has called for a state of disaster so that the army can get involved, and there are different policing measures that we can put into place to stop the movement of animals. But I can go from probably Winterton all the way to Clathui or to Durban. So to put that into perspective, probably a 4 or 5 hour drive without going onto a single tar road or through a single fence line. So if we think that we're going to be able to police every single road, I think we're dreaming. And this is people's livelihoods. As I explained, we need it. Then the communal areas need to sell for school fees, to feed their children, to feed their families. The commercial farmers need to pay the bank back for a lot of the bonds on their farms. It's livelihoods that need to keep on going. I think there's a massive flaw in the minister's plan because of that. People need to live. They need to keep their businesses running. We can't have thousands of farmers going out of business and not being able to feed our country.
Is there a second wave coming? Do you think there's another outbreak coming?
Oh, it's continuous, Sean. It's ongoing. Farmers that were positive in June were positive again in November, and it just keeps moving. It's not something that comes in, sorts out that whole area, and then disappears. It's ongoing, and if the minister thinks it's going to take him 12 months to vaccinate 80% of our population, our farmers are going to have outbreaks 3 or 4 more times before they get safeguarded with vaccines. So it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing spread. Cow immunity doesn't last long enough. And because it's moved slowly up until recently, that spread just continues going. So if your farm had it and your neighbor gets it 2 months later, it comes straight back to you.
One of the things that I've noticed from your company, there's a huge sense of urgency in everything that I've seen. And like even with these aggressive targets, reaching 80 to 90% across the hot spots plus boosters, that takes months. Cash flow to a farmer dies way before this ever happens.
Yeah, farmers typically are asset rich and cash flow poor. So they need that continuous cash flow in order to survive. Fortunately, a lot of the suppliers have shown grace and said, pay me in 3, 6, 9 months' time. But if you're getting an outbreak every 3 months, there's only so far you can push that debt load. And it is an urgent thing that needs to happen. I am sick of seeing dead animals being shot, animals with their teeth falling off, their tongues being stripped. It's a massive animal welfare issue, and that cannot be seen as not urgent. And unfortunately, our sense of the word of urgent and state sense of the word of urgent seem to be two very different things.
And that's a great point. And so, why aren't these vaccines? Why haven't they been privatized in that a farmer can go down to the local co-op and get the vaccines? And foot and mouth disease is not something new. It just didn't appear. It wasn't a COVID that happened overnight and started spreading. every country in the world knows about it. So what's the What are the politics involved that make it such?
I don't understand politics enough to answer that question, Sean. I've racked my brain on numerous different reasonings, and I cannot find anything plausible. Maybe not being educated, the state not being educated on this, which I don't think is the reason. They'd had the task teams. I don't know. That's a question that we've asked DNAs in, and unfortunately we don't have answers to that. And hopefully one day we will, but I don't know enough about politics to understand this. It's just horrific.
I mean, you can go down to any town, fairly sized town in South Africa, and you can buy a Chinese vehicle, but you guys can't get vaccine from a sister country in Botswana.
Yeah.
There's there's no trade embargoes. I just don't understand the politics behind it. It's got to be politically driven because, I mean, in this day and age, especially in the modern world, first world country, we can get on Amazon and I can order just about whatever the hell I want to and have it here within a couple of days kind of thing. So for me, the idea of not being able to go out and get something that could potentially save the entirety of my herd and my livelihood, I just don't understand it.
I think a portion of it is justified in terms of we need to make sure that vaccines are safe and that they are the right strains. Oh, sorry, we're obviously load shedding here. Let me move to light the area so you can see me. We've got the ONA strain, according to legislation. There we go, we're back. According to legislation, if you picked up with ONA in your herds, you've got to cull your whole herd. So government does need to be strategical about what vaccine we use, but they need to be able to put into place safe vaccines that are for the correct strains that we can get access to.
We've been through a bunch of this already, but what's the takeaway? I mean, what is there an end in sight? Is there a rainbow at the end that you can foresee, or is it all doom and gloom?
That's a really tricky question, Sean. And if Steenhuisen or any of our political leaders are watching this, I'd like them to know that there's grace in this place. Our farmers have lost millions, if not billions, of rands so far. And if they come forward and apologize and get onto the right track, there is grace, there is forgiveness. We can move past this together as a country. We don't want to wage war against them. We want to wage war against this disease. But it needs to be urgent. Things need to change. And if things don't change urgently, I don't know that there is a rainbow at the end of this, or a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So things need to change. We'll accept an apology as long as we can change legislation, privatize so that either our vets or we can get access to vaccines to be able to protect our herds. And it needs to be urgent. It can't be in 12, 24, 36 months' time.
Grant, what's your take on it? What's your gut telling you?
I think that we're in for a rough one. I don't think it's not going to be easy, and I agree with Emma. We've got a lot of problems ahead of us, but I just hope that these promises that have been made are somehow fulfilled, although I don't hold out too much hope. The intentions are right. I think vaccinating the whole herd is about the only thing we can do. I'm not a boffin. I don't understand how these things work, but I can't think of any other option or destroying animals in the path of the disease and creating cordons where the disease can't move on. But yeah, I think we're long past that type of draconian laws. That was 100 years ago. Those type of laws could be made. And so I think we're on the path of the only possible solution. But it's all about how that is enforced and how the supplies are made available. And I'm with Emma that it's out of our hands. We don't have the ability to change these things. It's up to government to change the laws that allow us to vaccinate or allow the private sector to start manufacturing these, and they will. I think the South African private sector has the ability to manufacture these. It might take a while, but definitely they've got the know-how. So unless these laws changed and if the urgency is not expected, I don't think there's going to be a rainbow. But we've got to remember that the countries north of us all operate under the same situation that we have now. Foot and mouth is endemic in those countries, and they manage to make a living. But I think this is more about prospering than making a living. This is about making sure we remain the powerhouse of Africa, and we give our people the best chance they can have, or what they deserve, to be able to get ahead. We don't want to be known as one of the poorer countries in Africa. We want to be known as the leading country in Africa. So I just hope our government has the same sentiments, and they embrace the goodwill that everybody's showing, and the people, as many people that are breaking the law, there are people that are trying to live by the law, and hopefully it will result in something coming out of it that creates that rainbow.
And I hope that you're right. I'm not sure that personally I share your optimism in that. For example, you guys can't even keep the lights on, as Emma just showed us. My thoughts about the actual government doing what they're supposed to do, the South African government, and getting to you guys in time. I'm not overly thrilled about the notion that we've got to rely on those guys for it. But Emma, let's wrap this thing up. So you've got the mic now. What if you want to get your message out there? What do you say to people? What can people do to help? What can we do to bring this to light so people in other countries are aware of what's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I think in conclusion, this is not a problem that just affects the farmer. It affects the secondary industry, the processors, the consumer. And consumers, please keep buying meat and milk and make sure that it is from your home country. Imports crash the farmer's profitability. So if you're in South Africa, please buy South African milk and make sure that it's not imported, and check the country of origin before you buy it. Milk meat cannot harm you. So keep supporting our industry. And then please just keep making a noise about this, and hopefully our government will listen and do their jobs. We are backing them to make the right decisions. We are praying for their wisdom, that they would be able to make those right decisions and execute them urgently. To farmers, you are not alone in this. I know that the depression and the anxiety has been massive in our industry at the moment. Keep looking after yourselves and your people. Your staff are your biggest asset. They are exhausted. They are as stressed as you are. Keep feeding them. Keep employing them. Keep your doors open. Hang on there. See a psychologist if you need to. Make sure that you keep your bases covered. Steenhuisen, Modisane, Dr. Emily, please show up for us. We need you. Cyril, show up for us. Your families, your communities, your country is crying out. We need you. Can you please help us?
That was perfect. Well, guys, listen, Grant, Emma, thanks very much for coming on. I think this is a very important issue that most people don't understand is going on over there, and hopefully we can make, several thousand more people aware of it, and hopefully they can be proactive in it. Most of our podcasts are lighthearted and fun. This one is not so much. This is very much matter of fact and punch in the face, but I feel almost obligated, with as much as your country has given me over the last 2 decades, so to give back in some way. So if I can bring some light to this and help in any way, that's what we here at Saltlick want to do. So, but guys, thanks for joining. We appreciate it. Good luck. We'll stay in contact, and we're going to try to get the message out for you.
Thank you,
Sean. Thank you for being our voice. We really appreciate it.